okay now more than ever to be a lesbian. It's even better for others if you put a bit of lipstick on, because that's the representation that we're getting bombarded with at the moment. But where are the boys? They're not coming out at the moment, so...
I'm sure Ian Roberts has done a great thing. He's a rugby player who's come out in a very homophobic field and said, hey, I'm gay, deal with it. But again, he's been taken up by the gay media as an icon, partially because he is such a big, butch, macho kind of guy. It's just perpetuating that image that, oh, gay men aren't effeminate, limp-wristed pansies. And hey, a lot of us are, and there's nothing wrong with fighting traditional masculine stereotypes by sort of like bringing out your effeminate side or your femme side more if you're a gay man.
From about 1900, the first bodybuilders, Eugene Sandow, started to show off their body as an object of beauty, something to be adored. And that developed through the 1920s and 30s with the physique magazines, and through to the 1950s in America, Bruce of Los Angeles, and the pin-up with Eve Cake. And that has come forward through the androgynous period, which was quickly rejected, I have to say, by gay men. Because they wanted to get away from the camp stereotype, the limp-wristed pansy, and the androgynous was seen as being too closely linked to that.
Everybody from your standard club type who would be just as much at home on the dance floor at Three Faces or the Peel, and then we get sort of like queer punks, we get gothics, we get ferals, Britpop kids, all the different musical subcultures coming together. Sometimes united by their sexuality, sometimes united by the music. We get quite a lot of straight people coming along as well. 95% of the time you can't tell who's who at Q&A, and I think that's actually a good thing. Because I don't want to be labelled, and a lot of my friends say they don't want to be labelled either gay or straight by the way they look. They just want to be accepted as a person, as who they are, not as just their sexuality first and foremost.
At the moment the balance is up here instead of being, accepting the feminine side and exploring it. And I think that's a great problem with gay men coming out and seeing that this is the ideal that they have to live up to. These 6-foot high images of Ian Roberts in Sydney in on Mardi Gras time a couple of years ago. This god that we're supposed to kind of try to idealise and look like, and this is why the sacrifices people make going to the gym, the time, the effort, the money, the class. I mean, what do people have to do to get the money to go to the gym, to have the tan, to buy the clothes? And it builds masks and facades. It doesn't explore your inner self. It just offers this mask and facade for people to adore.
You have to have the blonde hair, the tan body, the pecs, the arms, and whatever you have to work out. And that's an image that seems to be global. It's come out of the USA. You see it in gay porn. You see it on the cover of gay coffee table lifestyle magazines. It's a global phenomenon, and like the music, everything else, any club you go to around the world, you get that image being rammed down your throat. It's horrifying.
It becomes asexual. There is no, in trying to be, we were talking about this earlier, because in trying to be individual, the individual becomes consumed in this universal ideal, and therefore they lose their individuality and they become asexual. So, this kind of, and it perpetuates, it keeps on being promoted by the media, by gay society. But it's not down to the media and society, it's down to the individual buying into those power systems and those power structures.
That's true. When I first came out, I had the long hair, I was wearing the dresses and stuff like that. No, you'd never pick up if you had lipstick on, if you had long hair, because people thought you were straight. And I succumbed to the shaving off the head, but I wear dogs, I've got a shaved head, I've got makeup on and a skirt, I don't fit into either the butch or the femme, and there's a lot of people in my category, both men and women, that don't fit either stereotype. And when you first come out, you want to cling to a stereotype because you see that's something you identify with. The lesbians with the shaved heads and the dogs, yes, I'm a lesbian, so you be my role model.
some of the literature that I was looking through that I did get from Catherine actually, there was a brochure and on the back it had some of the truths and some of the lies. And one of the things was about sexual deviance. Now I know a lot of the community looks at the bisexuals as sitting on the fence and not quite sure and therefore a bit sexually deviated and would do almost anything sexual. Is that the truth?
Well, not really. I mean, by saying they would do almost anything sexual is assuming that no one else would. Like that, say all people who are either gay or lesbian or heterosexual are one thing and bisexuals are another, which I think in all the communities there is that diversity of people. Like some people are monogamous, some people are not. Some people preference one gender over another. Some people preference some types of sex or sexual actions, whatever. So I think that like any other community, like the gay and lesbian community, there is that diversity.
But I found, I was considered heterosexual because I was possibly at the time with a man. And I think that to me it just seemed too cold and hard and defining, And I think that, queer for me, I was getting into an argument with one of the girls earlier, and we were talking about what queer means, and she thinks that we hide behind that. It's just too fluid, it's too whatever, But I think bisexuality is like man, woman, let's get a bit creative here sexually, as far as I'm concerned.
Boring and tired stereotypes, like being undecided, not making a choice, being permanently in transition and confused. I mean, we've made a choice and we've chosen bisexuality.
If you're in a relationship with a woman, how would you identify? How would you call yourself bisexual?
Yes, I would. That's because, I still recognise my attraction to men if I'm in a relationship with a woman. It doesn't mean I'm going to be bonking men at the same time, necessarily. But it means that, we're not labelled just by who we fuck.
You have to have a label, therefore you have to have a set of criteria that goes with that label, and if you deviate at all from any element of that criteria, then you're seen as weird and strange and you get ostracised from already being ostracised because, you're not attaching to something.
But by accepting a label, are you accepting to have some ostracisation?
How often do people accept labels? I mean, this is one of the things as well. Do you accept if somebody calls you bisexual or lesbian, do you have the opportunity to go, yes, I accept that label? Or do people just thrust it upon you?
I think the reason for that is the fact that it is very hard for bisexual women who identify as bisexual and who don't look conventionally lesbian to actually meet women sexually, and therefore they're more likely to have a male partner because of that, which gets a cycle going where, bisexual women are commonly seen as being in a heterosexual relationship, if you like, and therefore lesbian women won't touch them on a fear that they will leave them for a man.
Isn't that making an assumption that most relationships are then based on superficial image, on I'm attracted to you because of what you look like? Saying things like that means that you actually never get to know the person, but...
Well, not necessarily, because I think most people, one of the things about bisexuality is people like people regardless of their gender. The gender is often quite secondary to the person. You like the person's qualities, their personality, their values, beliefs, whatever. And often the gender they happen to be at the time is quite incidental. And that they prefer that the heterosexual community, that bisexual people don't experience homophobic violence or biphobic violence in that matter. And, if you look at your stats, you look at your anti-violence projects, it's simply not the case.
If you're looking at bisexuality as being sort of in that void patch, you're saying it can slip between both communities, if you will. Doesn't that make it a little bit more difficult in a society that wants to box you and wants to put a label on you? Then you're deliberately ripping those foundations out from underneath you, and so no one really knows how to take you or treat you because they don't have a set of criteria to understand you through.
Catherine, maybe you could give us some examples of what sort of homophobic behaviour you actually get from the gay and lesbian community. Look, I know we discussed a couple of things yesterday.
Yeah, well, I think you have to look at any gay and lesbian press, for example, and count the number of times you see bisexual except in the personals columns where it says no bias. You'll probably come across it maybe once if you're lucky.
You must be pretty desperate to read those fucking things.
Well, that's the thing, because I do know bisexuals they are pretty bad, that actually do read them for that matter and do write to the newspaper and say, if people are going to say no bias, couldn't they say lesbian only instead?
Oh, they say straight acting and,
what's that mean? Straight acting? What's that?
But isn't it the choice of the person who's placing the ad to decide what sort of
terminology thing? A way of putting it, like you couldn't say no Asians. or no HIV positives. You know, like you can say no bias, that's okay.
I mean, the idea, I believe in life is to grow and change constantly, and you know, you come across an experience that changes you, you shouldn't have to be in a situation where you fear suddenly saying, well, yeah, my views changed because I've had this experience. I'm not sure where, in terms of the community, I don't actually spend a lot of time in what I think people stereotypically call community. If you were to generalise, I predominantly spend a lot of time around straight people, and in situations where it's not queer oriented. So I haven't, and in my life I've never found that much dissent about my sexuality. Everyone I know knows about it, and no one has ever had a problem with it. I've never found myself hindered by it. It's never stopped me from doing anything. So it's, you know,
Dolph, perhaps if I could start with you. You've been with Girlpen for quite some time. Perhaps you could tell me why it was set up and what its function was.
My role in Girlpen firstly came about because I am an ex-member of the police force, so I could belong to Girlpen's membership. Girlpen is an organisation, Gay and Lesbian Police Employees Network is its name, an organisation designed to provide support and advocacy for gays and lesbians in the employ of the Victoria Police. It started in about June of 1995.
And are you still a member of Girlpen at present?
I've resigned my position as junior vice president because I felt that in the present climate that we find ourselves in, that it was important I not be viewed as an impediment to change. And I'm going overseas shortly, so I will be resigning my position temporarily while I'm overseas, which should be for about 6 to 12 months.
Now, in the last 18 months, there's obviously been some changes after the statement made by the Police Minister. How has that affected Girlpen?
Well, I think that the Minister's comments were a negative reflection of Girlpen. Not only did he discourage the visible presence of gays and lesbians within the Victoria Police, he certainly did not give any encouragement for Police Command to do anything for gays and lesbians within their employ, but he also specifically spoke against the support network, which is Girlpen. The last 18 months, the Victoria Police can actually be categorised as having done nothing to improve the visible presence of gays and lesbians within the force. So really, what can actually be seen that Girlpen has had to change with the times. Girlpen is an organisation that must exist within the structure of the Victoria Police and abide by its rules and regulations, of which there are many. The difficulty is that if they are to speak out, they immediately get sanctioned for doing so, even though their roles as executive members of that particular group is appropriately authorised by the Chief Commissioner, has specific media roles. The moment that they do speak about that organisation, they are then faced with punitive measures.
I understand from speaking to you previously, Peter, that when a gay crime is actually reported to police, it's not recorded necessarily as a gay crime, and that's something that your group is certainly very intent on.
Some 5 years ago we said to police, you know, we need statistics on what the lesbian, gay, hate crimes are, and there's no way currently of recording them, and they've made no attempt to record them, and so we really just don't know. It's only anecdotal information that indicates what the level of hate crime is, so we can't say whether it's deteriorating or getting better or...
It comes back to this enforced invisibility that our community faces from organisations such as the police. They're forced to be invisible in terms of being in their uniforms. A policewoman doesn't have to give up her sexuality or her gender by putting on that uniform. She still is a policewoman, a female. A person of ethnic or Aboriginal descent does not have to lay that aside in order to become a member of the police force, but they expect that of gays and lesbians.
Every member of the police force is able to handle gay and lesbian issues equally. Well, the practice is that's not the case. The very few ordinary, straight, everyday members of the police force are able to tackle gay and lesbian issues with the sensitivity needed to follow it through from reporting to the end point at which the victim or the person reporting the crime is satisfied with the outcome. It's just not the case that the average straight police member is able to handle these issues. They should be using gay and lesbian members of the police force at prime contact points with the gay community. They should also be using gay men and lesbians in the police force to help educate other police members. Well, police are engaging with many different community groups like the ADP and the rights lobby on an individual basis. That in itself is great, but there's a problem if the PLGLC actually ceases its existence now. And I know their long-term plan is to hopefully foster these other organisations, assist them along the way, and maybe go out of business. They won't need to be around.
But do we need to be in business?
I think we need the PLGLC now, for them to go out of existence now and not to be there as the prime liaison point.
But why do we need them there at the moment?
McGrath wins. Not so much McGrath, but the homophobic push wins. And I'm not saying the police are homophobic here. I'm saying the actions they take to limit DOLF's effectiveness, to limit the effectiveness and negotiation power of the PLGLC is in itself homophobic.
We had a very clear goal 18 months ago, which the police minister assisted us greatly on. And that goal was to put policing issues back onto the public agenda, to actually show the police force for the emperor without clothes that they really are in terms of allocation of resources specific to gay and lesbian issues. And when I talk about gay and lesbian issues, I'm talking about bisexual and transgender as inclusive to all of those. And to also foster other groups that could assist in financing various programs that could be of benefit to the community. One of the big problems that we had as an organisation is our name, Police, Lesbian and Gay Liaison Committee. If we are to become incorporated, we needed the police force's permission to do so. They would never grant us permission to do so.
I know while at the level between PLGLC and the Victoria Police Force it's pretty poor, but I know from the Anti-Violence Project's perspective we've actually been dealing quite well at region level with police. We've had their support in developing funding applications to go into the Justice Department, and we've also had a number of gay and lesbian members of the police force that have had the imprimatur to actually support our development of funding initiatives and policy implementation around prevention of violence for the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender communities. So we are having a great relationship at coalface level, but it's at the PLGLC Victoria Police Command level, I think, where the major policy initiatives have to continue to take place.
Well, what the research seems to be showing at the moment is, yes, there are more men having unsafe sex, but there are also more men having safe sex. The statistics are a bit confusing, but basically what seems to be happening is that people are having sex more often, but the proportion of people that are actually having unsafe sex isn't really changing. So I don't think there's a complacency there. There's also the issue of who people are having sex with, who they're having unsafe sex with. And there's a lot more negotiation, a lot more thought going into what choices people make.
Look, I think a way that some men are choosing to have safe sex is not necessarily using condoms, but actually negotiating some sort of agreement. Now again, that does require high levels of trust and honesty and openness, but unfortunately not everyone who enters these agreements is actually able to be very open, honest and trusting when needed. It's quite a long process to actually get into one of these agreements, and it does actually require that people go through a certain number of steps and be tested at least on 2 occasions, clearing the window periods. And I guess what it really means is that it benefits those who are either in or anticipating a long-term relationship with their partner. When we talk about agreements, there's also, I guess, a perception that you sit down and you write things down. In my experience, that doesn't seem to happen, and through the work that I do at VAC, people are sort of stumbling through it, and making sort of guesses at, what their agreement will be and what it won't be, and what they'll do if maybe they slip up. So I think it's a strategy, again, that works for some, but not for everybody.
So I think that as time's gone on, I think gay men have got a lot cluier and a lot more clever actually about dealing with keeping the infection contained. And I think that's more or less really brought out by the figures. I mean, in Australia, the figures have been really well contained, and when you actually look at what's going on overseas, you don't get that. It's very, very different. When you look at America, they haven't had the partnership model we've had in Australia, and as a result, there's been some serious problems, but we've reaped the benefits of that partnership model. I think the sense of urgency isn't there, and it isn't as great as it was.
Is that valid, not having that sense of urgency?
I think it's still a bit early, really, to say that, we're over it. I mean, it's really early days, and the kind of stuff that we're doing now in terms of the treatments that are coming through and really having a lot of effect, they're showing a marked impact on people living with the virus. Those treatments are really, really good, but we know that viral resistance to those drugs is going to be a really big problem. And unless there are continuous new drug agents to actually deal with the virus, what we're seeing at the moment is really breathing space only.
Perhaps if we could go to you now, Darren, being the doctor on our panel this evening, if you could give us an explanation of what the antiviral treatment actually is.
Okay. All the antiviral treatments are designed to reduce the amount of HIV in a person's body, because we know that the more virus is in the body, the more damage it does to the immune system. So these antiretroviral drugs are all aimed at reducing the amount of virus there. They stop the virus from reproducing itself, and they do this very effectively. In the old days, we only had AZT. It caused a lot of problems because at first we didn't know how to use it properly. It was taken in very high doses. Now we know that it can be taken more safely at lower doses, and we combine drugs together. We use at least 3 drugs to treat people, and we have a choice of probably 12 or 13 medications. So we choose 3 from that, and we usually make one of them either a protease inhibitor, which are a very strong new type of medication, or a bit of a mouthful, a non-nucleoside analog reverse transcriptase inhibitor, which is another class of drugs which are similar to the protease inhibitors but have differing side effects. And we're hoping that as many people as possible who are HIV will consider going on these sort of treatments because they do make a difference.
You just explained to us some of the positives about these drugs, but what about the negatives?
Well, one of the main negatives are the side effects involved. They don't affect everyone, but they do affect a significant number of people who are on these treatments. And the side effects can range from nausea and diarrhea to just feeling a bit flat and tired. Tingling in the fingers and toes can occur with nerve damage. The pancreas, which is in the abdomen, that can get inflamed and that can be quite dangerous.
What we found in some of the social research we've been doing is that people are very interested in having a range of treatments that embrace both traditional medicine, Western medicine, and complementary therapies or alternative therapies, including anything from massage through to herbalism or Reiki and those sort of things. And people are very well informed, and that's sort of one of the characteristics of the HIV positive community, is that they're probably the most informed group of people about their therapy and their choices.
It's about looking at your quality of life and dealing with stress and actually dealing with, where your life's at and where you're going. So it's like things like massage, like relaxation, like quality time out, doing all those things that look after yourself, and simple things that you kind of you take for granted, but things like having a really good diet and making sure you get good vitamin supplements and so forth.
There's certainly a lot of people who do use various complementary therapies. We have an acupuncturist at our clinic, for example, and she's used quite extensively by people with HIV. Sometimes it's to actually help boost the immune system. Other times it's to treat HIV-related problems, and yet other times it's to help fight the side effects that our medications have caused. Things like tiredness, nausea, diarrhea often respond very well to some of the complementary therapies. There's Bill Clinton, as you probably know, has put, I forget how many billions of dollars into this. This is his goal for the future, to get a vaccine, and it's highly likely that a vaccine will emerge. I think that's going to happen. The question is when. Next year, 5 years, 10 years, we don't know. But there will be one. We shouldn't count on it, though, for the near future.